Hello neighbors, it's Brad here from eTrailer, and today we are taking a look at installing the Blue Ox base plate on a 2026 GMC Sierra 1500. And overall, there's a lot of different choices of base plates, but Blue Ox has done a really good job of utilizing where the factory tow hooks are located. So unfortunately for our AT4, there's no longer red tow hooks, but your safety chain loops sit right where they're supposed to be, so you could still use those. And overall, you get a really clean look when just driving your vehicle around. So taking a closer look, where we had our tow hook slot, our receiver opening sits pretty well recessed in a good way. It's not sticking out too much, and I like that they have the bend on the safety chain loops. It gives it a nice clean look overall. Now, these bolt up directly to each individual frame rail. There's no connecting crossbar, and normally with trucks, it can be as simple as taking out the tow hooks from the bottom, putting these in. That's not the case. Trucks are getting a little bit more built differently in the front, so all of the front end is going to come off. So this is really a good time to get all of your flat tow components knocked out at once. That way you can get everything ran nice and clean. And that's something I want to speak to, is this really doesn't come with any good mounting spots for your components. So as far as your diode wiring, I drilled in the plastic and mounted it that way, and the same goes for my breakaway switch as well as my air fitting for our air brakes today. So that is a little bit of a drawback. You may have to fabricate if you want to get fancy with it, but some other base plates may have mounting options. It kind of depends. This being a new truck, they may not have options quite yet, but if that's something that's important to you, if you're doing this installation, it does make it a lot easier. That's not to say you can't accomplish this all the same. But overall, again, driving around, going to be pretty clean looking. And when you are ready to flat tow, the arms are just going to be a quarter turn twist. So you just push it in, twist it, and it locks in place. And then you can hook up your tow bar. When you are wanting to take these out, super easy. You just pull this pin back, give it that quarter turn again, and then they'll slide out. So super easy to get this all ready to go. And speaking of that, I am going to get ours set up to hook up to our motorhome, but something I want to point out is making sure that you have the proper height on the hitch on your RV to your base plate. So that way everything's nice and level. When it comes to flat towing, you want it within 3 inches of height, rise or drop. So measuring this, I found that these come in right at 19 inches from the ground to the center of the pinhole. So I recommend measuring the hitch on your RV and then comparing it. And if you need anything, we have high-low adapters available here at eTrailer. So overall, a great base plate, and it's going to do a fine job of pulling it down the road. And as far as installation, I've never really seen a huge difference on these trucks from brand to brand. So if you're a fan of Blue Ox and you're looking at this video and you're interested in getting it installed, I'm going to walk you through that installation. But again, I mentioned that this is something you're going to want to do at the same time as all your components. It really does help make everything nice and clean for the installation. So if you're watching the video or other videos and you decide, you know what, this isn't something I want to tackle on my own, I understand. Flat tows are kind of an interesting thing, and if you've never done them, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So if that's the case, but you still want to get your vehicle set up for a flat tow, you can use our dealer locator by plugging in your zip code and finding a list of dealers close to you so you can get it all installed and be out there on the road flat towing. For you DIYers that are going to be tackling this yourself, I'm here to guide you through all the steps. So along with your instructions, follow along and we'll get this base plate installed. Now before we begin our installation of our base plate, there's a few things that I want to cover. And that's going to be, as you pull off the fascia and you get your base plate installed, it's a great chance to really get the rest of your flat tow components installed, to run the wires nice and clean and have a good clean path for all of your components. Also, there's going to be a lot of hardware that comes off to remove the fascia, so have a nice organized spot to keep it. That way, after a few days of doing the rest of your install, you'll have all that hardware and it'll go back together a lot better. And you're also going to want a nice spot to keep the fascia while you have it off so it doesn't get scratched in the process. So the first thing we're going to do is get our hood latch release taken off. And this plastic cover is just going to be 2 T15 Torx screws. So we'll get those taken out. And then this plastic part will slide out, and that's going to give us room to start taking off this shroud. This shroud will need to come off, and there's just a series of plastic push pins. So if you look in the inset here, as well as the insets up front, and then if you go around the back side, we're going to have a bunch of those. So to get these pried out, a trim panel tool, this is something definitely worth picking up. They're really handy, especially in spots like this. You just pry up the center, and then you should be able to get the whole thing to pop out. Flathead screwdriver also works well for these. So we'll go around the entire edge of these and get all the plastic push pins removed. And then now we should be able to just pull this up and we'll set it aside. Now with that removed, it's going to expose 4 10mm bolts along the front grille. So we'll get those taken out. Now we're going to head to each of our wheel wells and we're going to remove the liner. There's going to be a T15 torque screw here and then one here. So we'll get those taken out. Now our wheel well trim we need to peel back because our front fascia is attached to the front fender with a small bolt. So to get this popped back, reach underneath here and just try to keep pressure. There's going to be a series of clips along here, and as we get one of them popped out, you can there's going to be blue clips that are attached to it. So you got to be careful. You don't want to rip these off. And if you can get a small flathead and push the blue clip. That'll help kind of pop that out a little bit easier than fighting it. And so as you get one popped out, just work your way up to the next one, kind of keeping your fingers there as pressure. And that blue clip, as I pop this out, I'll show you it, but if you just put the flathead on the edge of it, that'll help kind of snap that out. And they may separate from the clips. We'll just make sure that we hold on to those as we go. So when I put pressure on them, there's a small little lip there. If you just put the flathead on there, that'll help kind of get that to pop out. But the bottom part of the clip still may be attached like we have here. So just kind of, again, keep pressure. And then when that blue piece pops off, just make sure that you're holding on to them, and you can put these back on here if you want. Now, as we get to the top, you're going to see that there's a different style of clip, and we want to get at least 2 of those popped out. That's going to help kind of get this pulled back to gain access to our 7mm. But don't pull these back too far. If you put a crease in these, it can leave a mark and it's probably going to be permanent. So the main thing is don't pull back too far. The white clips though, what you can do is if you peel back the inner fender liner and reach behind, you can get to the spot where you can take a 7mm socket or a wrench like we have here and just put this on the back side of the white clip, and that'll push in those tabs and make it a lot easier. Now keep the pressure here, but as I push that wrench down on those white clips, you'll see that it does separate it a little bit easier. So when you get it to this point, what I'd recommend doing is get some paper towels or shop towels and roll them up so it'll wedge this out to give us that space to be able to gain access to that screw, and then we'll get this removed. And we're just going to repeat on the other side once you get this one taken out. The next thing that we're going to want to tackle is going to be the screws that attach the fascia to the front fender that are on the inside edge. There's going to be 2 of them. The instruction manual says it's a 10mm. Ours is a 7. So I just have a small ratchet here. We'll get those taken out and do that on both sides. Now once you get those screws taken out, this section will actually slide down. Those plastic tabs that you see, the black plastic there, if you pull this down and out, this will really make it a lot easier to get the fascia separated, because normally the body clips in through these and you run the risk of breaking those tabs. So the fact that you can take this out is going to make it a lot easier. Now you're going to want to head underneath the front bumper, and we're going to find that we have 4 10mm screws. So there's 2 here and then 2 on the other side. We'll get those taken out. So I went ahead, I put some painter's tape along the edge of this fascia as well as the fender, and that's really just to keep any of the friction from chipping or scratching our clear coat, anything along those lines. And I also went along here because the first thing we're going to be removing is going to be this white plastic. The grill is going to stay for now. This is going to give us access to that hardware, but we're going to be popping clips along the sides. So the first thing I'd recommend doing is to pull back. And that's why pulling out that section there, I think, really helps get this to be a little easier. But as we kind of start to pull this back, you're going to find the clips along here. You're going to want to pop that. And I would start doing this because there's clips along this edge, which you can reach back here. There's just these little middle tabs, but if you can push those out, That's really going to help start to pull this. You can actually see the notch on one of them there. And what I'll do is I'm going to grab my plastic trim tool and wedge it there to keep that pressure. And that way we continue to pop these down. You can start to see there's a clip there, and they run along the bottom. So the best way to do it is really just start on one side, get the other side, and then work towards the middle. So as I'm starting to work on this, if you just kind of pull this back, you can start to get these clips. And if you see the clips to where you can get that plastic trim tool in there, it is going to help loosen this up and start to really get it all wedged out. So like for instance here, if I just kind of put pressure while I'm pulling back here, that's going to help get this all pulled out. So you are going to have to put a little pressure here, so just take your time. But as you get clip by clip, you'll start to get it like that. And then along this bottom edge, I got the other side to that point. What I'm going to do is kind of reach underneath here. And again, you don't want to break these clips, so if you kind of pull down on here, you'll start to see where those clips are. And as you pull back and push on these tabs, you'll start to kind of pull this until we get the entire bottom section off, and then we can set this aside. There we go. Okay. And we're going to get our grill removed, and there's going to be a 10mm screw that's in this pocket. There'll be one in the center, and then there's going to be one on the other side. Now we're going to be pulling our grill off, and you're going to need to put a few different spots of pressure. So up top, where those 10 mils were originally, if you pull this up, you'll see that there is a plastic tab that kind of keeps it aligned. So it's important to keep this one pulled back, at least on this side. And there's a clip that's directly right here. And you can probably pull it out. I'm going to just take a pair of channel locks, pinch down on it, and help push that through. Now see, this already kind of dropped back down in place. So keeping that out and pulling that pressure back is going to help us get this grill taken off. But we need to make sure that we don't break these tabs. So pull these up as you pull back, and it should get a little easier. And then that clip that I mentioned, it's going to be this metal tab that's located right here. So just a quick pinch there and push it through should help us get the rest of the grill off. And don't pull back too far because we do have sensors that we need to unplug. This is going to be for our front squirter or our front camera. So on the passenger side, we'll get this one separated. There's a red locking tab. If you pull this back, and some of these can be tricky, so if you need a flathead to push that back, you can absolutely do that. But once you do that, you push down on the red, that'll separate. There's also this plastic Christmas tree that pushes in, so you can use a trim panel tool or just pull this out. And then we'll get our squirter line over here. There we go. And we shouldn't have anything coming out because it feeds up, so I think it's above where our reservoir is. So if it is leaking, just pull this up and that should keep it from leaking anymore. Now you may have some residual coming out, but there's not a whole lot left in there. So we'll set our grill aside. Now we have shrouds that go on our flaps for our active shutters, and it's just going to be some push pins along each edge that we're going to remove. So we'll pry these off and get each side taken off. Now you'll notice this flap, this is going to pop out and give us access to how the bumper is attached. So to get this taken off, you'll just peel it back up a little bit and then get the plastic push pin on each side here. Now as I peel this up, I do see that we do have a few more that we're going to want to tackle, so just get those taken out as well. With those taken out, we should be able to get this slid out and set aside. So now we're going to head underneath, and this is going to start to pull the bumper off. So you'll see this bracket, the frame brace that goes from the frame to this lower portion next to the fog lamp. So 15mm socket, we're going to get this bolt taken off. And once we get this taken out, we'll just repeat on the other side. Now eventually we are going to be removing more bolts to remove the bumper, and our main harness that we have here on the passenger side, we're going to want to remove that now so we don't have wires attached to it. It'll make the bumper a lot easier to pull off. So pull back that red tab, push on here. There is a plastic Christmas tree here as well, so you can pull that out. Now the last bolts we're going to attack are going to be, we have an 18mm bolt that's right here. And then if you look down right here, there's also one. So we'll get those taken out on both sides, and then we should be able to get this bumper removed. Now we'll just slide this back, and that rubber section, we'll have to go over the tow hooks here. And it does look like we have another connection that we're going to want to separate on the driver's side. So I'm going to just lightly rest our bumper here while we get this separated. And this one's pretty simple. Just push on that gray tab and pull that out, and then you can set your bumper aside. So now we're going to get our base plates installed, and it's going to be a little bit different side to side, just because we are going to be drilling holes through to make access for one of the bolts, and from one side to the other it is going to be different just because of this plastic here. So on our driver's side, we're going to be able to use the base plate as a template, and as we get a little bit further into it, I'll show you exactly what I mean. And the other side, you kind of use the hole as a template. So let's get this started by taking this plastic cover off of our tow hook. You'll just slide this down, and then there's a plastic push that you can just pull out, and we can set this aside. Now there's two bolts, and you'll see on the other side of the vehicle that it's actually a little bit easier because the threaded portion, the back bolt, is on the other side, so you can just take an impact to that. On this one though, we're going to put an 18mm wrench on the head of the bolt and then take the nut off. That's also an 18mm. And then to get this back bolt out, I'm going to just use a ratcheting 18 to be able to remove that. And then to get this bolt out, it's actually hitting into this plastic here, so this is kind of not great for us to pull this out. If we have to, I may end up just notching this a little bit because I can't really get the bolt to a spot to pull this out. So just I think cutting a small notch here is going to really help us out. Now we can put our tow hook aside. This will not be reinstalled. Now you may or may not have this additional brace. We are going to be using this lower hole, so we need to get this removed, and there's going to be a 10mm socket that's right here. One that's completely underneath. Pretty straight shot up. And with those removed, you'll notice that this lower section can move a little bit, and that's going to be good because as we pull this bolt out, we're going to run into a very similar issue, but I think we can move this out of the way. So with my 18mm ratcheting wrench, I'm going to pull the head off this bolt and see what we can do here. Those screws loose, and I can pull this out far enough, I think. It's going to get tight here in between this shroud and the radiator. So what I might end up doing is pulling off these two 7mm, and that's going to allow us to pull this forward. I can almost get it out here. Let's see. Because this is kind of a plastic flap that is flexible. And we can get it out. So that way I don't have to remove any of this. But this shroud, we'll take this down, and we do have to remove this 10mm as well, and then we can pull this down. So that bracket can go away. This will go back in place so we can bolt up underneath. So we'll just put this back up with the 10. Now we're going to grab our base plate, and they are not side specific. So what we'll do is grab your long bolt, and we're going to put a flat washer on it. And this is just going to loosely hold this in place while we use this as a template. So as you hold this up, you're going to see pretty quickly where we need to drill out because we have 2 holes on this side where the bolts can pass through, but only 1 on here. So our other hole is going to go here. Now, as I mentioned on the other side, it's actually kind of reversed. So you only have 1 hole on the inside. So that really does make it easy to use the outside hole as a template to just run that drill bit through. And honestly, I would probably do that first before you get any hardware in place. So on the passenger side, you know, run your 1/2-inch drill bit through the hole and try to get it as squared up as possible. Now, when you start to mock up your base plate, you'll see pretty quickly if the holes are lined up, and you may need to waller it out a little bit. But after kind of test fitting that other one over there, I found that it is going to probably be a lot easier to do without hardware in place. Now, you can put this bottom one in, and that is going to be the first step of both sides, is getting this slid through, and that way it just kind of holds that in place. And so we know that where we need to drill out. So what I'm going to do temporarily is put our bolts just loosely in the holes so we know that they line up, and push this flat. And what I would recommend doing is taking a paint marker and marking that up, and that way you know exactly where to drill out. Now, I started with a pilot bit. I would highly recommend doing that as well and work your way up to that 1/2-inch. Now, I would suggest going to maybe a little bit larger, wallering it out. The holes are slightly slotted, so you know, it's not gonna, being that we kind of just used a template, it's not gonna be a factory hole that lines up, and with tolerances, it's always okay to go a little bit larger. So now with the hole drilled through, bolt passes in, no problem. We're gonna start getting our hardware in place. And so for the 4 holes, as well as the bottom hole, we'll use the same combination of a bolt, split washer, and flat washer. And we'll raise this up. And again, just loosely put these in. But before we loosely put them in, something we're going to want to do is put a little bit of Loctite just on the threads. Not that I think they're going to come loose, but just added, you know, protection that rattling going down the road long term, it's not going to cause any issue. And for each of them, we're going to be using the handle nut. So we just thread this on. And it is going to kind of get tight with these sticking out, but you can bend them as necessary. Just don't break that tab off quite yet. And we'll just get the remaining ones in place. The one from the bottom, so in the instructions they mention you may have to drill this out. We have this triangle here. Our bolt passes up with no issue. So we'll get all these in place. Now, something I might recommend is where we drilled that out, it's raw exposed metal, and we don't want that to rust, especially with having those 2 pieces of metal sandwiched together. If water gets in there, it would probably turn to rust and corrosion. So I'm just going to take a little bit of paint and spray that on the outside and on the inside. Now, with all of those in place, I hand tighten them. I didn't snug them down because we want to make sure that our larger bolt can go back in place. So I did pull this back out. That's so we can put some thread lock on here. And then we'll pass this back through, so make sure you have that flat washer. But you'll notice that there's a pretty large gap in between our base plate and the frame. So what we're going to do is take 3 washers, and we'll feed these in place before passing it through the frame. And this will cinch down a little bit. But once passed through, we'll finish it up with a flat washer and then our nylon lock nut. So now we're going to start snugging everything down using a 3/4 inch socket, and you're going to need a wrench on this larger one. The way that I'd recommend doing it is start on the bottom one first. That'll draw it up. And then I'm going to do this back one, and then I can tackle the sides. So now, once we have everything snugged down, we'll come back with our torque wrench. And torque settings are going to be found in the instruction manual. There's a chart for the hardware. These are 1/2-inch hardware, grade 5. So you can take a look at that chart, and we'll just go through, get these all torqued down. Now, these ones are going to get pretty hard to do as far as getting a socket in place without having issues. A crow's foot attachment can work. So if you need to do it that way, by all means. Another option too is a ratcheting wrench. If you kind of match the torque, try to get it as close as possible. It really does bottom out pretty good. So just make sure that you're tightening it up though. Now, once everything's torqued down, to get these popped off, a lot of times you just kind of go back and forth and that weld will break. You can put some crazy bends on it too if you need to, but for the most part, these, it doesn't take much and you can get these to pop off. You can also just cut them if you want. It's kind of up to you, but we'll get all of these removed. So with this side done, you'll just repeat on the other side. And as I mentioned, the main difference is going to be that instead of using the base plate as a template, you really are just going to run through this hole and drill it out. Try to get it as square as possible. But similar concept of getting everything all tightened down. And from here, we need to grab our safety cables and we'll get that wrapped around. That's just going to be added security. Now, this safety cable, we're going to be putting one on each side in the quick link. And this is going to be in case of, all of this hardware was to fail and this was to rip out of the frame. This is going to wrap around an existing part of the frame to keep it all attached. So it's just a, just in case kind of thing. So the main thing is wrapping it around a spot that it does go around the frame. So what I did was put the quick link on this hole, looped it up and over, and then brought this one around. Now, obviously there's a little bit excess here. We can zip tie this up out of the way. So when we put the fascia back on, if it's in the way, we can absolutely do that. So I'll get my other side put on as well. So with that all in place, at this point, you're good to get the rest of your components in place. There's going to be a little modification that we're going to be doing on the bumper, just to take out a shroud that goes around where our tow hooks were. But that's really all we're going to have to do to get the bumper put back on. But I'm going to get all of my flat tow components in place, and I'll show you how to take that shroud off. But from here, you've pretty well installed your base plate on your truck. Now, because our base plate is much larger, or at least wider than our tow hook, the modification that we need to make on our bumper is actually pretty simple. The instruction manual, you're going to be pulling off all of this metal part, and that's because there's one screw that holds this plastic cap on. But we're not really, we're not going to be putting this back on. So I'll show you a quicker way to do it. We'll first take off our metal clip here. So just with the flathead, you can pry this off. And it does have some teeth on it, so it may be bit into the plastic, but this just kind of raises up, and the little screw is attached back here. You really can't gain access to it, but honestly, just a little bit of tugging here and there, we can get that to pop off of that section. So that's all it is. So it does break this in the process, but again, our base plate is going to fill this spot, so really it makes it a lot easier. So do this on both sides. Now, I like to normally leave the fascia off because it allows you to get everything mounted up. But with this one, because there's so many pieces to it and the bumper was the last piece, I would actually recommend getting this in place, and you could at least bolt up the 4 bolts here if you wanted to. But when putting this on, take out the arms so they don't extend out, and then as you raise it in place, just kind of start it at an angle so you can go around these hooks here. And then once these are aligned here up top and then the kind of that bolt that's down there, you can lightly put those in place. This really helps when it comes time to mounting up not only your 6-pole but your breakaway switch, and in our case we're doing air brakes, so and air fitting. These trucks are kind of notoriously tricky to find good spots to mount them up, and Blue Ox doesn't really supply you with anything to make it much easier. So a lot of times what we end up doing on these is our 6-pole, we drill a hole and just use self-tappers to mount it. The same thing goes for your breakaway switch. There are some bolts sometimes that you can attach those to. That's why I don't recommend completely getting everything put back in, just loosely modifying it to hold it in place so you can kind of start getting everything laid out how you want. But the main thing is you get a nice clean look overall, and it's all going to be structurally sound. Now, I got everything all put back in place, and I want to give you kind of an overview of where I ended up putting things. So my 6-pole, I ended up drilling a hole, and I did use a bracket on the back side to get this mounted. I'm really happy with this overall. And then as we look over at our braking system. This one I cut out a nice notch. I did have to fabricate a small bracket to drill into the metal on the bumper, but it was just kind of a 90-degree angle. So cutting the slot here, you'll find that the metal tab's back there. So if you are fairly mechanically inclined and can fabricate something, pretty easy to do to make this looking clean. And as far as our air fitting for our air brakes today, I took the bracket off, drilled a hole, and then retightened it down. So overall, a really clean look. I like the fact that these fit right where the tow hooks are, so no major chopping up of anything. And yeah, with everything back in place, we're gonna get this hooked up to our RV, but that's gonna do it for the installation.